You can't build a dynasty through the draft alone. You have to be savvy with your contracts and cunning in the trade market. Today, we're talking about some trade strategies and contract guidelines to help build your dynasty. How's it going, everybody? And welcome to Franchise Mode University. Today, guys, we are touching on contracts and trades. I think those are two massive points that people are often asking me questions on. And in the last one, guys, we talked about how to draft and develop players. This is that next step. Once you've drafted your players, once you've developed your players, how do you acquire those missing pieces that maybe you couldn't draft? Maybe you couldn't find a number one pairing defenseman. Maybe you couldn't find a third pairing or a third line center to shut down the opposing team. And maybe you just are in a bad contract situation depending on whatever team you started with. So today we're going to go through some of my general contract guides for you guys, as well as ways to trade and just kind of know the trade market in NHL and understand what some of the terminology that the other GMs are going to give you, what that means, and it really gives you an idea of how close you are. One of the first things I like to do once I start a franchise mode save with the team, in this instance, we are the Anaheim Ducks, I like to come down here to this View Contracts tab. It's under the Manage Contracts group. But here you go, you can see, now we see everything as far as contracts for our team. We can take a look at some of the guys in the system maybe that are coming up, but really I like to prioritize the main roster first and foremost. And I like to generally go from the back out. So what that means is I like to start with my goalie situation and then look from there. As you can see, we do have two pretty quality goalies, 85 in Lucas Dostal, 83 in Peter Mrazek. And yes, we can see that Peter Mrazek will be expiring. This UFA means he's an unrestricted free agent. I'll show you an RFA in just a second here. But what that means is an unrestricted free agent, if you don't sign them to a contract before free agency opens, they are free to sign with whatever team they want for whatever. And there's no compensation for you. You've got no way of stopping it. The only way to stop a player who's at a UFA from making it to free agency where other teams can bid on them is by giving them a contract before that July 1st deadline. If we go ahead and take a look here at the defensemen real quick, we can see that Olin Zellweger and Mintyukov here are RFAs. What that means is in the contract re-sign phase, you have an option to qualify offer. And I'll go ahead and show that here when we get to that stage. I'll probably leave Ian Moore here. I will just qualify him as an RFA. But essentially what that means is if you qualify the player, they have the option of accepting that as their contract. It'll generally be 1 year and about $1 million or so, depending on who it is, right? The situation can change, but for the most part, it'll tell you what the cost is going to be if they do accept it. And sometimes if you string them on long enough and it gets to the start of the next season, they will accept it. I don't recommend that though. I highly recommend if it's a player that's an RFA, they have to be a young enough player to be an RFA. I believe it's anybody younger than, I think, 27, like 26-year-olds, I think can be an RFA up to that point. And then by the time they get to UFA, they're generally in their prime and towards the latter half of their career. But as an RFA, you can negotiate with them just the same way you do with a UFA. You just get those rights to them if you qualify them and you don't come to an agreement by the time that re-sign phase before July 1st happens. On July 1st, they are a qualified RFA, meaning if a team wants to sign them, they have to give up the compensation required. And you can see the compensation here if we go down to offer sheet compensation. When you try to sign a player in free agency that has the RFA tag, you would be notified that, hey, depending on the amount of money you're giving them per year, this is the compensation. So as you can see, under $1.5 million is essentially no picks required. You can just get that player if the other team doesn't match it, which is something else I should mention. If you do qualify the player, they make it to free agency as a qualified RFA, and another team offers them a contract, you have the option to either match that contract, assuming you have the cap space to do so, or you can let the player walk and receive the compensation. So let's say that some team offered Mintyukov $7.1 million. That would require them to give me the upcoming year's first, second, and third. And maybe I'm like, well, Mintyukov hasn't been developing as well as I wanted to, and it might be worth it if I was going to trade him for a first, second, and third round pick. I think I'd be happy with that. So you go ahead and just don't match it. Or if you're like, listen, 7.1 is a steal. I made this trade right now. I got rid of one of my goalies and I freed up $2.5 million that I needed, and boom, I can qualify him, or I can match it. That's the benefit of having an RFA, is you get just to keep them on the same contract offered by an opposing team. But if we take a look At free agents here, I don't think that there are any RFAs. If you hold the right trigger or R2, you can go ahead and sort through all of these. These are actually handy. I do actually like these, that EA added these, but you can go ahead and see if you just don't want to worry about compensation, just go to UFA. If you click on RFA, there are none at the time because it is the start of the season, but I will show you guys. Hopefully there's going to be some RFAs for us in free agency when we get to that point. But for now, I want to touch on contracts in general. And I like to look at my team from the blue line, or from the crease out, crease, blue line, center ice, right? Goalies, defensemen, forward. So I know that Peter Mrazek is expiring, and well, I probably don't want to re-sign him because we have Lucas Dostal, who is the starter lockdown. Depending on what Mrazek wants, it's probably going to be too much for what I would consider the right amount for a goalie. And what is the right amount? And a lot of you that clicked on this video are probably asking what is the right amount for each position group. So we will just go ahead and start with the forwards. And I'm going to give you guys numbers in percentages of the cap. I will translate it into starting year number 1 values. But just go ahead and know that if you go ahead and offer a contract extension or offer a contract, you can see the salary cap percentage over to the right. So you guys don't have to worry about doing the math later on. As the cap goes up in game, it will adjust that salary cap percentage over to the right. So we'll start with the superstar, the franchise elite first line player. We don't have any of those on the team right now, but I'm gonna just quickly shift over to Boston. You can see David Pastrnak is the perfect example of this. He's making 11.25 million. My ideal range for a franchise player is 10.5 million to 14.5 million, which is 11 to 15% of the cap. When you get into the teens of percentages of the cap, that's when it really starts to get dicey, and you got to make sure that that is one of your core players. You are going to win a cup because of that player, not because that player helps somebody do it. No, but that player is capable of carrying you to a cup. So when you identify some of these mid 90s, low 90s players, we'll take a look at the Buffalo Sabres, right? You've got, Tage Thompson signed on a good deal, I think, for him. But I would not consider Tage Thompson somebody that is going to win me a cup. At 89 overall, I think he is a great first liner. I think his contract is a bit of a steal, but these are the guys you're expecting to get 70 to 85, maybe 90 points out of, right? Those first liners that are really good, but they're not your franchise cornerstone. They make 8 to 10 million, in my opinion, 8 to 10.5% of the cap. The next bucket is the most tricky bucket in the place where I see a lot of people go wrong, and it is that second liner. That guy that's on your second line can maybe play on the first line depending on the roster, right? These Granlund, Troy Terry type players, even Mason McTavish here. I think these guys are great second liners, but this is a dicey bucket because these players can ask for a ton of money because they maybe had a really, really good year. I do not recommend going over 8% for these players. I think 5.5 to 8% would make sense, which is 5.5 to 7.5 million against the cap. If a guy is going to ask you for 10% of the cap or 9% of the cap or start pushing like 9 million in year 1 as far as what he's asking for, I think that is a great trade candidate in the offseason if you can RFA him or maybe trade him at the deadline or before the season. For example, Leo Carlsson here. I trust Leo Carlsson. He's a medium elite, 84 overall. I think the sky is the limit for him. But let's say he wasn't going to really grow and he was asking for this 8.3 million. I think this would be a great time to move on from Leo Carlsson, take the trade value I could get back for him, and we'll talk about that in a minute here. But getting rid of those guys that probably are going to cap out at an 84, 85, 86, right? And they're asking for, over 8% of the cap. Next, the third liner bucket. This is generally where I can see people overpay for like favorites, or maybe somebody was a second liner, they get bumped down due to overall and they want a new contract. That's usually the guy that I consider phased out of my team, in air quotes. That guy that was making 6 million no longer really fits the bill. Like, think of a guy like Chris Kreider here, 6.5 million. Even Strome may be pushing it for me. I think I could make it work if he was making 5 million, but Chris Kreider here, let's say I go out and I do acquire one more forward. So then we'd have Granlund, Terry in that forward, and then McTavish, Carlson, and Gauthier, which pushes Kreider down here to the third line. Obviously, 6.5 million is really high for a third liner, but I think anybody making above about 4.25, 4.5, I think that kind of player is just making too much. And that would equate to 2.5 to 4.5% of the cap. And then finally, your fourth liners down here, they're generally these type of guys that are making about 1 to 1.5 million to something in the decimal points, right? 0 point something. That's perfectly fine. Like Harkins here, Johnston, they're not great players. Paling is probably overpaid if I was going to consider him a fourth liner. It's not egregious. I think anything under 2%, or right now that's 1.75 million. Hopefully this all makes sense for you guys. Maybe if you want, I can put it in the comment section or something. But come back to this spot in the video, write it down, take a screenshot, do something. But here are what I would consider the ideal ranges for forwards. Next, we'll talk about defensemen, and the first category we're going to talk about are those Norris winning elite franchise defensemen that are putting up a point per game, maybe more. I've had defensemen put up crazy amount of points, 90 plus, maybe even 100 plus points in a season. Those guys, yeah, you pay those guys. You can't find those guys very easily. One thing you'll notice is that years in the future, you do tend to run out of quality defensemen. So putting together a really stacked decor or really just solid 3 pairs becomes really, really tricky. So paying your franchise defenseman, I think, is worth it. And I think they get in the same treatment as our franchise forwards, that 11 to 15%. The 10 million to 14.5 million, something like that. I don't want to go too crazy here, go 16, 17% on any player. I think by the time you're paying almost a fifth of the cap for one player, you need to ice 21 players a night, right? So you've got, 80% of the cap for just 20 more players. It just doesn't, the math doesn't math. So when I'm capping it at 15%, some players may ask for more. Unless they're basically Wayne Gretzky, I wouldn't go that much higher. Next, we'll talk about your standard first pairing defenseman and your typical 70 point wingman, your 50 to 65 point guy. I think that's where you want to go. He's your ride or die. You shotgun with your franchise guy. I think he can make 6 to 8.5 million, which is 6 to 9%. I think that's a very, very satisfactory range for those kinds of guys. I think you can find them pretty regularly. Jacob Trouba, not really what I'd consider one of those guys, but he's not interested in an extension. We'll touch on that in a second here. Next, for the second pairing defenseman, your middle pairing your defenseman, you want to keep him in the $4, $5, $6 million range, which is 4 to 5 to 6% of the cap right now, because we're really close to 100 million on the cap. But as it goes up, it'll change. They're your solid middle guys. They're kind of a dime a dozen. Think Radko Gudas here. You can find guys in the 84 overall range who are making this $4 million pretty much everywhere. I think that's a really, really solid, bang for your buck. You're not going to be too upset by the value you get there in your contract. If you start pushing above the 6 million range, I think you start to maybe question if that player is really worth it. Maybe they're a defensive defenseman and they are just an amazing shutdown dude. They're always a massive plus. You love seeing the body checks that they throw. And yeah, sure, they put up 23 points a season, but they're one of the guys that is like a glue guy and just makes your team click. That you found that when they're in there and they're playing well, they're a plus and they're just set it and forget it. Yeah, maybe you can push above 6 million, but then you're maybe talking about a guy that rides shotgun with your franchise defenseman. And then finally, with your third pairing defenseman, you want to keep it in the range here of Helleson. You want to keep it in the sub $2.5 million range, right? You don't want to really touch 3 million with these guys. I think that's an overpay. So yes, there is a gap. We go from 4 million is the floor really for your middle pairing. If you get your middle pairing guy for less, by all means do it, right? Like the floor on these ranges is not like, oh, this guy makes this much, therefore he is this type of player. No, if you can get your star center for a really, really good deal, like we saw with Tage Thompson in the Buffalo Sabres, right? He's making about $1 million less than what I recommended is your standard first liner. Yeah, that's a really good deal. Do that. But in order to save money, you really want to go for 2 million or less. I like to err more on the side of like 1 point something, even 1.9. It feels better to me than 2.0. So that's usually the range I like to do. That's 1 to 2% of your cap there. Finally is goalies, and goalies are a little bit of voodoo. I've always found them to be a very, very tricky situation, even for myself, to value what a goalie should make and what I should pay him, or if I should move on from him. If I have a top 5 goalie in the league, somebody in the low to mid 90s that is an elite starter and their stats back that up, I'm willing to pay them over $8 million a season, 8.5 to even 11, right? 9 to 11.5. I think this is when you start going over, 10, 11%, anything above that, when you start to leak into the 12%. You probably should save that money for your forwards, particularly, and maybe your defensemen. I think you can then move on from that goalie if he's asking for a crazy amount, and you can probably find, the 9th best goalie in the league will give you a good amount of similar performance, and you'll save about $4 million, which, as we've discussed, is a solid middle pairing defenseman, or could be that third line shutdown center that we've been talking about, that guy that you want to get. If you're just looking at an average starter, like a guy like Lucas Dostal is here, I think 5 to 7 million is the sweet spot for that. I think, most cup winning goaltenders are going to be in this range, right? Most teams that win the cup have a goalie, get paid this much in shell, and they're usually around this overall, right? That middle, maybe upper 80s, pushing upper 80s. That's your average starter. I think 5 to 7% of the cap, totally fine there. If you've got some backups, I don't recommend going above $2 million for your backup. If it's really, really a big issue, maybe go above 2. But your backup, to me, shouldn't really make $3 million. They should be making 1, maybe 2.0. I wouldn't go much higher than that. That's about 2% of the cap maximum for your backup. And you can find plenty of goalies, even in free agency. I could probably find one right now. That's a pretty decent backup goaltender for us. If we take a look here, look at this, 81 overall. So we'd be dropping 2 overall points to sign Jones, Martin Jones here. I know he's 35. If you want to get somebody a little bit younger, go with Malcolm Subban at an 80. But these guys don't even make $1 million a year. It is an absolute steal. They'll give you serviceable play. If you've got a quality starter, you're going to ride your starter for 50, 60 games a season. You'd really only be looking at 30, 20 games for your backup, which can make a difference in the long run. So don't deprioritize the backup goalie entirely. But I would say that backup goalie is the least valuable position to me, which is why I'm willing to spend the least amount of time and money on this position. So now that we have our guidelines for what we want to give each role on our team, let's talk about extensions, and especially when it comes to these young player extensions. We'll talk about Leo Carlsson and Cutter Gauthier. I don't know exactly what they're going to be asking for. We're going to do this on the fly, but you'll get to get my thought process behind it. So the good news for us is they do want an extension. And why I say that's good news is because they generally won't ask for crazy prices, and they're much, much more willing to negotiate. So what I like to do, I don't really go into the enter negotiation. You end up potentially clicking something that maybe I wanted to try, maybe I didn't want to try. You end up pissing them off, and then you've just lost the negotiation ability with that player. So I like to jump right into offer contract extension. And this to me is a red flag. Not so much the fact that I think Leo Carlsson is not going to grow, but the fact that he only wants 3 years, I don't like that. He's 84. He's medium elite. He's just 20 years. He just turned 20 years old. He just got out of his teenage years. He's already a quality middle 6 player for me. Probably going to be a second line center at least by the end of the season. And that should tell us that 5.5 to 7.5 is about right. Now he'll probably end up being a first liner, so I don't mind the 8.3 million that he's looking at here. And obviously he loves the contract because it's a bridge deal, and by the time he's 23 years old, there's a high chance I think he's going to be in the 90s. He might be one of my star players. So that's how you want to assess these players. Some players that can grow obviously are going to ask for shorter term because they can get paid again and make twice this much in 3 years, depending on the cap situation. The first thing I want to do with a guy like Leo Carlsson is go to the maximum amount of years and see what he's going to ask for. He wants 10.3 million. And if I believe that Leo Carlsson can turn into that elite first line player, I'm absolutely going to match that, right? As you can see, as I change the years, the player ask column, which is just to the right here, right in the middle, you can see it's moving in value. So if you didn't want to maybe give him 8 years at 10 million, you felt that was a little rich, you wanted to let him prove himself just a little bit, you could go 7 years at 9.6, which, is, again, I think personally a steal for the kind of player I believe he's going to be. Now, he wants more because he wants a contract that matches his initial asking, so you may have to give him a little bit more. But if you go ahead and give him a no movement clause, because I don't plan on trading Leo Carlsson. If he's making $10.5 million, no movement clause, I think we're totally fine there. The clauses. And I know a lot of times the real life teams have given out some pretty bad clauses that really hurt. But let me just do my best to explain what this means. The no movement clause means you cannot trade him and you cannot waive him. He is basically locked to your team unless you can convince him to waive his no movement clause. There is a feature if you go to try to trade him, it'll ask you, would you like to start a negotiation start a conversation? And you would do that and just hope that maybe the low percentage chance actually hits. I don't like to give out no movement clauses unless I know it's a guy like Leo Carlsson. And as you can see at the bottom, at 8 years, the only 2 years of his contract that's this no movement clause is coming in is years 7 and 8. He's going to be 26 or 27. Maybe 28 at that point, depending on his birthday. I don't know when it is, but happy birthday, Leo. Maybe he'll be 28. I don't plan on trading a 28-year-old Leo Carlsson. And by the time I got to that point with Leo Carlsson, the cap is going to skyrocket. The cap is going to be up way higher than the 95. So this 11% is going to get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper every year. We'll probably leak into the 8% range by the time this contract expires, and that's how I know I got a value. I know that I'm looking at a franchise elite player that I'm paying, a standard first liner for. This is a guy that's going to win me a cup, and I'm paying him like he's a secondary option. And I've heard it a lot, that why do you pay the players now when you could just give them, you could save you could save $2 million by just giving him a 3-year deal. Just give him the 3-year deal and then figure it out then. The problem is he's going to ask for more than $10 million in 3 years. In 3 years, Leo Carlsson, my hope is a 90+ overall player who's winning trophies, putting up a ton of points, and maybe has already gotten us to the Stanley Cup. I think he's going to be asking for more than $10 million when the cap goes up a lot. Year over year, because the NHL just announced that it's going to go up quite substantially over the next 3 years, and I believe that's in shell. But even if it doesn't, it'll still go up. So as he continues to ask for a percentage of the salary cap, that percentage always will stay the same, right? So 11% now of 95 million is going to be cheaper than 11% of 110 million. So that's why I like to just get it out of the way now, because in year 3, I'll be probably looking at a steal. So we're going to go ahead and add the no movement clause just to increase his current offer interest. He loves the organization, hence why he wants to extend his contract. But as you can see, I like to be in one of those top 2 bars. And this no movement clause only kicks in for 2 years. The no trade clause is basically a no movement clause, but you could waive him. You can't trade him, right? You can't trade him still, but you can waive him. You can send him down to the minors and maybe somebody claims him or something like that. With the modified no trades clause, you can go ahead and give him a full or reduced, and it just impacts the number of teams on the no trade list. So you can see that a reduced, it's 12 teams and then 8 teams if I do 30%. If I do full and I do 25%, it's 8 and 8. So it's the same every year. So that's the modified no trade clause. The no movement clause and the modified no trade clause. I don't really use this one, if I'm going to be honest. If I'm going to give him a no movement clause, I'm just going to give him a no movement clause, because as you can see, the no movement clause is a full bar more optimal for him. And like I said, he can veto moves, but he gives a 4-team no trade list, and those are the teams I can't trade him to. So that essentially is what the clause here is. If we do a modified no trade clause, which I do like to sprinkle into my contracts, because it does up their how much a player likes the contract. Like 75% here would still give me 8 teams to potentially trade him to if I wanted to trade him. It just doesn't move it enough. So I'm going to go ahead and give Leo Carlsson a full no movement clause. 8 years, 10.5 million. And that's how I would look at this. I'm looking at him like a franchise first liner, and maybe he's not, but I have 6 years to figure out if he gets there. And before his no movement clause kicks in, I could end up trading him if he's not that player. It's not an unmovable contract at 10.5 million. There's plenty of players that are going to make that. And as the cap goes up, that's going to be a lot easier to stomach for other teams. So we're going to go ahead, offer him that extension. I don't think he's going to accept it right away, and he doesn't, right? So let's go ahead and look at Cutter Gauthier, a year older, slightly different player. what does he want? And he's going to ask for slightly less, but same terms. So we're going to go through the same strategy, and he's asking for 11.6. Now, I'm not too sure if Cutter Gauthier is going to be my franchise elite player. And what's the difference, right? What makes him different? You can see he's got no X factors and he's a year older. So I'm less confident in his projection. Now, I still think he could be a great player for us. Don't get me wrong, but maybe I do end up taking that 3 years, 7.7 million and seeing what happens. And it's totally up to you to trust your gut. This is the part that a guideline, a grid, something like I showed earlier, doesn't always take into effect. You've got to trust your gut, and that's, the human element of this kind of thing. That's why I don't always love to give very structured rules, like you need 3 of this, or you need to do this much, or you can only be within these range. I don't like to do that because there's a human element to this, and it helps you to learn the things that I'm talking about. These videos are just meant to help you guys get started off and running and learn basic tips that have really helped me enjoy the game the most. And if you find things that contradict what I say and it makes it more fun or more optimal, by all means, run with it. But what I'm going to do here is probably not sign Cutter Gauthier just yet. I may wait to see the end of the season, see how he performs. If he performs well, he may ask for more. But for now, I don't think we're going to come to a deal that's going to make us both happy. As you can see, he wants like a lot of money, and I don't know if I'm really willing to give him 4 years at 8 million either. That's probably a more optimal deal, but as you can see, by the time he gets to year 5, he then becomes a UFA. So at 4 years, he would expire, be an RFA, but that's his last RFA year. And players eventually, as you can see, will expire as a UFA rather than a RFA. But what happens when a player does not want an extension? We can see that Radko Gudas here, 35, 84 overall, does not want an extension, makes 4 million. If we go ahead and offer a contract extension, we can see that the organization bar is really, really low. So this is an area where I do like to sometimes start a negotiation. If I can get him to, if I can charm him on the organization, which is a 50-50 chance, then maybe I can sell him on it. If not, I'm not too hard pressed to watch Radko Gudas walk out the door. He was asking for 5.7 million for 2 years. As you guys know, that's pushing it to the upper limits of what I like to pay my second pairing defenseman. The difference here is Radko Gudas is 35. He's not going to be hanging on to this overall for too much longer. In fact, he's going to start declining. If I could get him for 1 year at a cheaper deal, maybe a 1 year, 4 million extension, just get him back what he's on, we'll see. But we'll try charming him, and it is going to work. So we're going to go ahead and just end the conversation. And it is going to hopefully boost his liking of the organization. It didn't do much because I didn't spend too much time in there. But as you can see, us finding a deal for Radko Gudas is probably not a best bet right now. I'm not going to put money on the fact that I'm going to come to an agreement with Radko Gudas. If we enter negotiation, we might be able to talk him down because he likes it. We'll just go new topic. We'll give him a 1 year deal, ideally. And then he wants 5.7. We'll negotiate it. And yeah, so this is why I don't necessarily love the negotiation feature, because we might get locked into it here. But if I can get him to cut it by 1.5 million, I'd give him a contract. And yeah, he's not a fan, right? He didn't want to cut his salary by 1.5 million. So if we go into offer extension now, he's even less happier about the contract. Previously, now he's fully happy about the contract. Okay, EA, whatever. I don't like to use the negotiation feature because, as you guys can see, it's a little jank. But Radko Gudas at 35 is a player that, hey, am I contending? Are we really winning a cup this year? Do I really think that this core, led by Troy Terry and Mikael Granlund, is that Mikael Granlund? Yeah, it is Mikael Granlund. 87, 86. And 85 on my top line. Do I really think that is a capable of winning a Stanley Cup? No, I do not. In no way, shape, or form do I think that makes sense. And we'll probably see the same thing with Trouba. I mean, Trouba being 31 and 85, I don't love the money. He loves the contract, doesn't love the organization. He's another guy that I could see myself getting rid of. Ideally, I'd get rid of just one of the two, because if we take a look at our lines, we'd pretty much deplete our blue line really quickly. Oh, yep. Yeah, let's take a look quickly. Oh my God. If we go to defense here, you can see that if we traded both Trouba and Gudas, we're kind of shoving Zellweger and Mintyukov up above where I think they would probably prefer to play, where I'd prefer to play them. I think maybe Zellweger would be the guy I would move up for Trouba, but hey, we get a +5 between those two. So if we trade Gudas, we can play Mintyukov and Zellweger together and get a +5. I think that's perfectly fine. So let's now jump into the trade section of this video. And one of my favorite features about trading, guys, is the find trade button. We'll go ahead here and just take a look. I love this so much because it just saves so much time. And as somebody that doesn't like to, you know, maybe spend too much time in any one save, you like to get through, get in, get out, it does make things a lot easier. Now, as you can see, Gudas has that modified no trade clause. So if we click the right trigger, or not the right trigger, excuse me, the right stick, and we scroll down to his contract status, contract info, you can see the tradable teams list. He's got a 10 team no trade list. So these 22 teams I'm able to trade him to, which is actually not too bad. I think that's totally fine. I don't know what teams are on it. But for now, we're good. So I'm going to go ahead and push X or A on Radko Gudas. I'm going to select him and then push the left bumper. You could push triangle to find a trade with your trade block if you really cared about it. Right now, all I care about is seeing what teams are going to be willing to offer me. A second and a third is great. A medium top 6 forward and a third, interesting. Appleton could be interesting if I really wanted another forward. Same thing with Comfer, those guys too, a second and a third. So we get the value of Radko Gudas is about a second and a third. So Kevin Hayes and a third. You know, we'll just start with this Carolina Hurricanes trade here. So let's say that instead of a second and a third, I'm going to push to see if I can get their next year's first for Radko Gudas. And here's the trade value. It's a second and a third there. You can see it's not, if we're just going to kind of eyeball it, which is the only way you can do it, we're probably not going to be able to get there first. And we'll talk about what the green and the red means in a second. But right now, I'm just going to try and propose Radko Gudas for a first. I highly doubt this is accepted. If it is, I'm going to take it and run, and we're going to pivot in this video. But no. Trade rejected. Got to be honest with you, Carolina is not too thrilled to part ways with what you were asking us to send your way. So as we see that text, we know that Carolina is not particularly interested in trading away their first. As we could tell, it was white text and not red text. What that means is the red text is things that the other team is okay with giving up, interested in giving up. Basically, if you call them, they're willing to work a deal out and just kind of meet in the middle somewhere. With the white text, you are going to naturally have to overpay more for a player that or asset, I should say, that they have no interest in getting rid of. And the trade block, you've met our block needs well enough, but the value you have on the table is too far off. What that means is, yeah, you're giving us Gudas, who is green. We want Gudas, but the value is not there. So you're either going to have to add more or ask for something else. So if we go ahead here and just throw back on the second, and then we'll also throw on 2/3 just to see how much closer it is. They offered me a second and a third to start, as you guys remember, but now we're negotiating. I want to give up, or I want to get an extra third. I want 2/3. I want a second and 2/3 for Gudas. If we propose this trade, I doubt it's going to go through, but I'm hoping that we see a little bit different text. And here it is. This is perfect. This is exactly the trade I was hoping to see. Oh man, I'm happy that worked out for me. The trade rejected, but why am I happy? Because it's that last sentence, but we'll talk about the first half. This would seem to be one of those occasions where the trade block paid off in spades. Carolina could start a deal based on what you want from us. So exactly, they are like, hey, we are totally fine giving you what you want. However, this meets our trade block needs quite well. Also meaning I'm giving them something that they're interested in, but to be honest, you'll need to sweeten the value just a touch. That sweeten the value just a touch means you have a deal. What it means is you really only have to give up one of your 5, 6, or 7. I like to start with the 7. Sometimes it's slightly off, but if you give up your 7th and it's green, or sometimes you can even give up like a skater matching the block that has like no value as well. Like we could throw in Johnston. Actually, let's throw in, we're going to try and re-sign more later. Let's throw in Johnston. Ross Johnston here and see if we can save the 7th. But usually you can go ahead and sort by the least valuable thing that they want. Johnston is white just because I already selected it, but there you go. You can see he's green now. But yeah, there you go. So he's selected. And if we go to draft picks, the 7th is a little bit more valuable. So I don't think we're going to be able to get Johnston for this. I'd love it if it was able to, but sometimes you got to give up a little bit more value than just like a pixel. But there you go, trade accepted. So like I said, you don't always have to give up your 7th round pick, but basically that means when you need to sweeten the value just a touch, they literally mean just a touch, just a skosh, a little sliver of pixels coming off of your TV or your screen or whatever. That's all they need. So there we go. Instead of getting Gudas for a 2nd and a 3rd, we traded Gudas and Ross Johnston, who's a 77 overall expiring contract, somebody I had 0 plans for in the future, and we're able to get an additional 3rd out of that. So I love the find trade feature because it gives you the ultimate starting point. You know exactly what teams are interested and about what value they're willing to give you. So just for, display sake here, we're gonna go ahead and call up Lunau, I think. Actually, no, we don't need to do that. We'll just go ahead and do the best lines in the NHL. For display sake, what we're gonna do here is also throw in, who didn't want a contract? It was Trouba. Yeah, Trouba's got a modified no trade clause. I don't know how big it is, but okay, we can see that Pittsburgh, there we go, Pittsburgh, love it. They wanna give us Novak and a 3rd. Or the Wild wanna give us Spurgeon a 4th and a 6th. But we'll start the conversation here with Brian Rust. We'll talk about Rust. And really the value is pretty comparable. I mean, I kind of like the idea of getting Rust 85 overall, does fit our range as far as that. I don't think it's a bad contract at all. He's making what, $5 million for a guy who I think is perfect for the 2nd line. Maybe he's one of those guys that gets pushed down like Kevin Hayes, but you can see his value there. So I'm going to remove Rust from the trade block. Or from the trade deal. You can see Rust here is red and is right about there for his trade value. But maybe, just maybe, instead of that, we could look and see some of their other picks. Maybe Pittsburgh has a goalie that we want to go after. I don't think Pittsburgh's a great trade partner for this example, but I think you guys are kind of picking up what I'm putting down here. If we wanted to go after a guy like maybe Rudder McGroarty or Kindle, if we go after Benjamin Kindle, he's 76 overall at 18. He's got a decent amount of trade value. Or we could go over Brunicki. Same, about the similar amount of trade value as Brian Rust does. I think it's actually less if I had to take a look at it. If we just go to all skaters, those guys will be in there. Yeah, you can see that Rust is here and Brunicki's here. So I don't want Rust. I would like to get the younger upside asset that is Rudder McGroarty. Because he's high top 6, he's 21. I think he could be a fit with our young core. There we go. And you can see he's a little bit lower than Russ. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and throw in a 6th round pick. And I like to do that just to make sure I'm squeezing every ounce of value out of it. So now I know that Pittsburgh was willing to give up a player like Rust. Now, here's the difference. Rust was red, which means they're more willing to get rid of him. I'm going to go ahead and give this a try. Rudder McGroarty is a little less valuable than Rust, but I'm throwing in the 6th to hopefully sweeten the deal on my side, and we'll see if this trade goes through. Propose the trade. It's rejected. We've done all right. Meeting the block needs. I'm reading the last one. But if you read the top, the Penguins are totally unwilling to part ways with what you've requested from us. So unless you're giving us something spectacular, don't waste our time. Ouch, that feels a little bit rude, but you've done all right meeting the block needs, but the value isn't sufficient. So as you can see, Rudder McGroarty may be less valuable than Brian Rust, but they are more inclined to trade away Rust, an aging player, and trying to get younger as a team than they are to get rid of Rudder McGroarty. Now I did add in a 6th. Let's go ahead, and I did that so that I could do this, throw in the 7th and see what they say. So Trouba for McGroarty in a 7th instead of a 6th. We'll propose that trade. Again, question even looked at the trade block, unwilling to give up unless you really make it worth our while. Done the right meeting the needs, but isn't sufficient at all. So again, they don't think it's sufficient at all. And I think what that means is I won't be able to do Trouba for McGroarty straight up. We're just going to give it a try. Oh, I would. So there you go. You can see a little bit different in value as far as red players versus the non-red players, the white players. You can see that if we go here, again, like we can see that he's clearly less valuable, not by much, but should be enough to probably get me a pick, that little sliver, but it's going to take me a bit more to get him off their team. I could even try and ask for, I probably couldn't ask for Erik Karlsson. He wouldn't waive his no trade clause to come to Anaheim, and neither would Evgeny Malkin. And if I wanted to get Rickard Rakell, I'd probably have to sweeten the deal just a bit. Yep. but the value is too far off, and too far off generally to me means I usually add in like a 5th round pick to get too far off to go through. We'll do this and it would go through, right? So, and then when that screen comes up, that basically means that your roster would be under the limit, which is, I always like to keep my team at the limit unless I'm playing with injuries on. I like to have just as many players, so when these screens pop up, I know that it's my ace in the hole. This is my little trading hack, guys. So when you see that pop up, when this roster move summary pops up, always hit cancel and try to give them just a little bit less, because what that roster move means is that trade would be accepted. So if we add in the 7th, look at that. I almost gave up a 5th, but thanks to this little roster move summary hack, I only had to give up a 7th. And the best part about find trade as well, guys, is it does work when it comes to other teams too. If you just hold your start button, you can scroll through the teams. And I went to Buffalo here, and I'm going to look at Owen Power. I think he's 22, 86, medium elite, another top defenseman that I think is going to match our kind of outlook. And well, yeah, Buffalo's kind of, as expected, looking to get a really elite player back in return. Mason McTavish, Cutter Gauthier, or Leo Carlsson. You guys know I don't want to give up Leo Carlsson, but they're at least willing to talk. You can ask them about Zach Benson as well. Similar story, right? We're looking at the same kind of thing. If we do ask for Tage Thompson, they want Leo Carlsson, right? So you're not going to be able to get something without giving something, but at least you know that, hey, there is a deal that could be made here. They want Cutter Gauthier, Ryan Poehling, and you know what? I'm going to try and say, you know what? You guys can have Ryan Poehling. I'm totally fine with you guys having Ryan Poehling, but I don't want to give up Cutter Gauthier. So now I'm going to kind of look and say, what do I have around Cutter Gauthier as far as this value bar that I would be okay with giving up? And I don't think there is much. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to throw Trouba in here, but they don't want Trouba, which makes him even less valuable. So for example, if I threw Mintyukov in here, they don't want Mintyukov, even though he's slightly more valuable. I believe it would go through because they wanted Gauthier, but I don't want to give up Mintyukov. They just want him less, right? They have enough left-handed defensemen. So that what this means is I'm going to try and make up for the value with a 3rd round pick and do Poehling, Trouba, and a 3rd for Owen Power. Just kind of spitballing here, eyeballing what the trade value is. It's probably not going to go through. It isn't very interesting, doesn't meet the block needs, and the value isn't there whatsoever. So let's go ahead, just throw in a 2nd. I think Trouba, yeah, but as you can see, I'm going to have to overpay because I'm giving them a player that they don't want. I don't mind giving up Trouba and a 2nd and Poehling for Owen Power because I think Power's an upgrade to Trouba. A 2nd is a 2nd and Poehling is a depth guy. So if I go ahead and propose this trade, it still isn't there. So trying to acquire a player that a team doesn't want to get rid of is actually quite difficult. Although you can get it done, you just generally have to pay more than I think you want to. If you do want to get a star player, you're going to have to really hope that a team is willing to sell them. Sometimes, like, look at this. Rasmus Anderson they do want to sell Rasmus Anderson. So Anderson, who is on an expiring deal, if you scroll over here, you can see that. He does not have an extension. So we'd have to pay him. But this is a guy I think could be our #1 defenseman, right? So we're going to go ahead and see what they want to get from us. Cutter Gauthier and Strome, Leo Carlsson, a 1st in Strome, which doesn't sound terrible to me. But again, you can see that it's still a lot. You got to give a lot to get a lot. There are no real hacks to me to get you a guy like Rasmus Anderson on an expiring contract. It's probably the cheapest you're going to find. Our 1st round pick is probably pretty expensive because we're projected to be pretty bad. Oh, EA, I hate that, how they switch what button when you go look at the draft picks. Oh, look, I'm looking at the skaters. They're all just draft picks. All right, cool. It's glitched. All right. Either way, there's no real hack. You got to give something to get something, but it's all going to be significantly easier if you guys go after players who are matching the seller's block, the red text players. Just circling back on the Leo Carlsson offer we gave out earlier, he's going to accept it enthusiastically. So we probably could have given him a little less money with the no trade clause, but regardless, I still think the contract is of fine value. I don't risk pissing him off because I tried to undercut him. It used to be a long-standing thing. I can't confirm if it does. I haven't used it in a while because it felt a little cheesy, but you can give a player 85% of what they're asking for, and they will generally accept it. That's the way it used to be. I don't know if it's still in the game because, like I said, I haven't used it because I try to stop myself from doing that because you can build really, really good teams with that method, and sometimes it'll give you the lower bounds. So essentially, if we were going to say hey, Leo Carlsson was asking for 10.3 million, we would then multiply that times 0.85, and that would get us to about 8,755. So I'd probably give him about 8.8 over 8 years, lots of eights. And then he might be able to accept that. Though I don't like to do that. Like I said, it is something that the community, and you'll read it on Reddit and on Twitter and all that stuff. You will hear it. It is a thing. It is not a myth. It definitely works. I just prefer to look at it in a bit more realistic way. So as you guys can see, we are now starting to head into the next season cycle, season number 2, and the salary cap has gone up to 104 million. And we can already see that our deal to sign Leo Carlsson has now come down a full % against the cap. It was 11%, now it's only 10%, and as it keeps going up, should be hopefully less and less, but it is a better deal. We will go ahead and get to free agency. Look at that. The Rangers moved up via Carolina's pick. That's got to sting for Carolina, but let's jump into the re-sign phase in free agency and take a look at what Cutter Gauthier did this year, and maybe if he's changed his tune as far as dollars. So we are now up to June 25th, which is the re-sign players day, and as you can see, the team didn't do so hot as far as points scored. I didn't think they would. We were in a playoff spot for a little bit, but let's take a look at those players that we need to re-sign. And you can see that we can go position by position, or just take a look at all expiring contracts, and there's a couple players. Cutter Gauthier now up to an 87, and this could potentially be the problem with waiting. He only wanted like 8.5 to 10 million when we talked to him at the beginning of the season. Now he's grown a full 3 overall points, and this, I can show you guys the danger of well, actually, I guess it's not a danger. He's asking for much less. For 8 years, he wants a lot less. So sometimes you get lucky and you get a situation like this where Cutter Gauthier now for 8 years has completely changed his tune. And some people might say that this could be a potential warning sign that he's not going to grow. I'm totally fine with it because he's an 87 overall that I think I'd love to give him a contract for like 8 million. I think this satisfies all of our conditions very nicely. I think, I was worried about him not being a potential first liner, not a superstar for us like he was asking for. I think that paying him 8 million, which is just a tweener, which is between the second line and the first line, I think that's a really big steal. As you can see, 8 million is now only 7.7% of the cap. And if we add the no movement clause in, he loves the contract. We're going to give him a modified no trade clause and give him 50% of the league. Maybe, 62% of the league. 20 team no trade clause, modified no trade clause, full structure. So it doesn't change over the 3 years, but there we go. 8 million, 8 years, modified no trade clause in full. He's not a huge fan of the organization, but I'm hoping that, the contract being what he wants as well as having a clause is going to supersede that lack of love for the organization. And Trouba, still not a fan of the organization. Mintyukov, you can see, we can see that him and, I think Zellweger actually lost his potential a little bit. So that's maybe a good way that we waited. But again, another guy here, 7.5 million for Mintyukov. He's medium elite, 22, 84 overall. To me, this is the kind of player that I'm looking at in the, the middle to wingman pair, if you will, right? So 7.5 million to me is right in that top pairing partner range. I'm totally fine with giving him that kind of contract. He's got no interest in a $5 million contract. I'm not surprised. But as you can see, as I raise it, we're going to go ahead and go up to 7.75 just to kind of sweeten the deal just a little bit, just to make sure he accepts it. Because he's not actually in love with the org either. So, hopefully just going to bring these guys back. No clause, but maybe give him a modified no trade clause that is full, and give him 90% of the teams. Well, yeah, we'll go 75% of the teams. That looks like a good amount of contract love. In the third bar, we might learn something new for me too here. So as far as goalies, right, Mrazek, we'll just look at expiring. I like to look at goalies as just in total. We have Huso signed for 2.2 million, which means I can absolutely just release Peter Mrazek. That gets him off the board. And if you have morale on, players will be a little upset that you did release him. But I did want to show you with even a guy like Olin Zellweger here. His qualifying offer is 0.925. So we are absolutely going to qualify him. We can't qualify Mintyukov because we offered him a contract. So always qualify first. So Ian Moore, I said we were going to qualify him. His qualifying offer is 1 million. So if I wasn't comfortable paying more 1 million, I wouldn't qualify him. Instead, go to offer contract. He wants about that 1 million, so I could qualify him nonetheless. But We will just qualify Olin Zellweger, offer him a contract here, and you can see that he wants a really, that's honestly for a middle pairing guy, 84 overall, medium top 4 potential. I think this contract to me makes a ton of sense, as much as I'd love to lock him down for like 8 years as well. I think even 6 years at 5 million, I'd be fine with, because I think he's still got a little room to grow. Like, right, 6 years, 5 million, $30 million contract. I'm cool with that. I'll offer that to him. We'll get back about our offer. Really handy button here, guys. You don't have to back out like I did. You can just hit square or X, the corresponding button on Xbox, to just go ahead and advance a day from this screen. I do like to pop out just to make sure everything's okay and I've not lost track of days, but sometimes if you're just grinding through it, just hitting square is going to get you through a lot quicker. And you can see Zellweger is going to accept the offer. The 6 years, 5 million. I think that's perfectly fine. Mintyukov is going to reject. He wants to be on a team that's vying for a Stanley Cup, so we're going to have to pay him a little bit more. Same thing with Cutter Gauthier. So we're going to go ahead and qualify these guys for sure, because if they do end up getting to free agency, we don't want to lose our opportunity to continue our negotiations with them basically exclusively. So as you can see, if I do give these guys 8 million, that contract offer wasn't enough. We'd probably have to get into the third bar. I think at least 3 bars is probably going to be enough. So as you can see, even though he says he's asking for 7.9, I still have to give him about 9.5 million. If I throw in that modified no trade clause and give him the 62% of the teams, we can probably bump this down a bit. As you can see, the clause does help out quite a ton. And honestly, 8.5 million for Cutter Gauthier. I think I'm totally fine with this. If I give him a flat 8.5 with the modified no trade clause, 20 team no trade clause, so I can still get rid of him to 10 teams. 8.5 million is just about that standard first liner. And, you know, he developed an X factor. He's 87 overall. He's medium elite, 8% of the cap. Totally okay with this right now. I think 8% of the cap for a guy like Cutter Gauthier right now. And as the cap goes up, it should get cheaper against the cap, if you will. So we'll do that. Mintyukov, you know, I think I'm going to have to pay him a bit more. Obviously 8 million. Let's see what he wants. He's going to want, right, probably, let's just throw in that clause real quick. The modified no trade clause, same one I gave to Gauthier. We'll go ahead here, throw it on Mintyukov, and we should be able to get up enough here to get him to accept this contract. We'll go with 8 by 8 for Mintyukov, because I think he can be that #1 pairing guy. He is only an 84, but I think we can get him there. We are in the third bucket here, so we'll go ahead and maybe go up a little bit more to 8.25, 8 by 8.25, 7.9% of the cap. That puts him right about our top pairing partner. And I think he could definitely be that top pairing partner. I think he might be the top pairing guy for us in the future. So paying him like a top pairing partner, I'm totally okay with that. So I'm going to go ahead and offer those two guys those contracts. We'll see. Mintyukov still wants to go ask for more. They both want more. So it looks like we're going to have to really sell these guys on the organization. And honestly, at this point, I'm not sure if I want to bring these guys back. Maybe I do have to budge on the years and give these guys, you know, just a prove it deal, a 3-year or a 2-year deal at 4.45 for Cutter Gauthier. He's still an RFA at the end of it. I'm just going to give it to him. Kind of want to keep him around. He'll get back to me tonight. Same thing with Mintyukov. These guys want bridge deals. I don't love bridge deals, but at the end of the day, I kind of want to keep these guys in the org. I want to see what it would take to keep Mintyukov with a, let's just go with a, I don't want to go no movement clause, because I don't trust that he's going to develop fully. So we're going to go ahead and go with a full, there we go, full, and then 62%. Again, guys, I kind of do this stuff, you know, with some general guidelines, but I like to feel it out. If a guy like Mintyukov, I really feel high that he is going to develop well, I think I could pay him like a top pairing defenseman. I'll pay him like a top pairing wingman right now. 9.5 million over 8 years. That is on the very top end of my top pairing partner, the wingman, 9.1%. So it's a bit pricey, but I still think I can move him with that medium elite. I think he's going to develop. I like his X factors. So I'm going to go ahead and just give him that contract. Hopefully, you know, the fact that he doesn't love the organization doesn't hurt too much. I mean, heck, we're in the middle of that second from the top bar, so I think we should get him to sign that deal. He's going to reject that again. So Mintyukov, definitely a guy that I'm glad I qualified, and we may just have to give a bridge deal. These guys seem to be pretty stuck on the bridge deal. So what I mean by bridge deal is that couple year deal in the middle between, you know, their entry level contract and then their potential big payday. So 3 years at 5.2. I'd like to pay him sooner probably if I could, but man, he really isn't going to budge off of that contract. So we're going to go ahead and just do it, and he's going to accept with the team and for the stability. So obviously it doesn't always work out in your favor. You do have to negotiate with the players. Maybe I could have traded a guy like Cutter Gauthier instead of signing him, but honestly, the bridge deal seems to be a pretty solid value for me. $4.5 million for a guy that is my third best player, and has a lot of room to grow. I mean, heck, this could be our first line next year. So $4.5 million for part of my first line is looking great for us here. And then Granlund and Terry moved down into $7 million, but $7 million of $104 million is then just quick maths here. 7 divided by 104 is about 6.7%. So for second liners, that is right about where we want to be, right? 5.5 to 8%. So they're still totally fine to be in that second line range. So there we go, guys. That is the contract and negotiation. Let's go ahead and just get to free agency. I don't really care about all the players I have to re-sign and whatnot. I just want to show you what happens when there is a potential RFA out there, and there's plenty of them, I'm sure. If we go ahead and sign free agents, we're going to go ahead and filter with the right trigger to just RFAs. Brant Clark, I would absolutely love to get Brant Clark. I think you'd be a fantastic defenseman for us to acquire. Connor McMichael, Dorofiev. We'll talk to Brant Clark here, but if we offer him a contract, exactly what he wants, that's $6.8 million over 3 years. If I go to hit start and offer a contract, I would have to provide the Kings with my first and my third. You can't just have a first and a third. They need to be your own picks. So if you trade away your first and then acquire somebody else's first, that doesn't fit the qualification to offer sheet a player like this. But I don't want to give a first and a third for Brant Clark. I think it actually might be worth it, but I'd like to keep my first personally. Simon Edvinsson too, 5.9 million, similar type of player. Offer him that. It would still be a first and a third, so there's no reason, unless I want to save the dollars, to go for the lesser overall players. Jamie Drysdale wants 4 years at 7.1 million, slightly worse player, not going to be worth it for me. But there you go, guys. That is the contract and trade offer guide. Let me know anything I didn't cover, maybe something I glossed over, something else you want to hear about, maybe something else you want an entire deep dive in anyway. But guys, that is all the time I have for this one. Make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you want to see some more, and I will see you guys in the next one.
It's a free for all, free for all.